Ryan Vasquez stars in the new musical The Notebook on Broadway. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Ryan, I wanted to start by asking you, you originated this role in Chicago in the production from about 2 years ago. What was your favorite part about doing The Notebook at that time? And has it changed now that you've been with the show for so long and are doing it in New York?
Yeah, that's interesting. When we did it in Chicago is the end of 2022, and obviously coming out of the pandemic at that time, and we were still very much grappling with COVID. And the show is obviously a love story, which I think people expect, but it's also about loss and life and how you spend your days and your time and the people with whom you do that. And I think it was such an open nerve in Chicago. Like it was such an ask to have people come in and have this experience that's really deep and human. And while we were proud of that, it's been nice to sort of let that incubate. And now with Broadway audiences coming, I think people are more and more willing to sort of have that their own little memory play of the last couple of years and of course of their life, so it's nice. It's really settled, where in Chicago it was sort of like an experiment, like, is this going to be too much for folks, and now it's proving that that's not the case. Like, people are really ready for it and ready to have this like deeper, little elevated introspective experience, which has been awesome.
Yeah, it's such a beloved story. The novel, the film. Had you read the book? Had you seen the film before you accepted the role back in Chicago? And once you kind of took the role, how much did you go back to the source material, or did you just stick with, the script and the score and what you had kind of in front of you?
Yeah, I saw the movie in theaters way back in 2004. So I remember I was a huge fan of Rachel McAdams. That was like the Mean Girls Notebook Renaissance sort of moment with her breakout roles there. So yeah, but I saw the movie in theaters. I was a kid, so it went way over my head just in terms of like the deeper themes of it. And then it's become this like cult classic is the wrong word because it's so ubiquitous. Like it's everywhere and everybody has expectations for it. And I think what really drew me to it when I read the script and listened to the music initially was that this version of it was going to act alongside these other versions, the book and the film, without being a regurgitation of those things. And not so much, I mean, there is of course the iconic moment in the rain. Like there are these flashpoints that we do hit, but less that and more that even the themes of it are really we're really exploring like a deep human element to the story, as opposed to what I think people may expect, which is this like saccharine sort of sticky sweet over the top love story that you're supposed to sort of swoon over. There's definitely a lot of that, do not get me wrong, but it's I'm proud of the way that it's truly been adapted and not just sort of shifted around and plug in songs in these iconic moments to make sure that it sings. Like it's its own entity, which is I'm really really proud of.
Yeah, one of the things I love about the production is that you share the role with two other actors, John Cardoza as young Noah and Dorian Harewood as older Noah. And I just feel like you three have really created a singular character. Like, you just kind of embody the same spirit of one person.
Mm.
How much did you work with the two of them to kind of figure out, okay, we're so different and we're playing the characters at different moments in time, but how do we kind of create a common character between the three of you?
That's the greatest compliment, of course, because that was, of course, such a focus, right? Like, we need to make sure that this is one unified person. And we, of course, did work together. I mean, there are these literal things in terms of gestures and things that we're sort of peppering in throughout the show to make sure that it's super clear. I mean, even Paloma's costume design is, of course, like leaning into that idea with sort of a color scheme for Noah and Allie as well. But I think what's cool about it is, I mean, Dorian, it's like an education to work with him. And of course, John Beasley, who played the role in Chicago, who passed since the production, like there's people's DNA is in this role, whether it's the older, the middle, or the younger version. And so now there's like this big stew of all of these, countless choices, countless little things that we can sort of draw from. And on the flip side of that, which is like the actor's dream, it's like you're working as a team, but then when you're in your own scenes, you really are bringing your individuality to it. And I think what's cool about this show and the life it will have surely is that we'll see all sorts of people playing these roles, inhabiting this character, and they will bring their authentic selves to it. And so it will continue to sort of build this like universality in this person that people will be able to see themselves in, whether it's in their older age or like in the sort of young love or the complex middle section, right? And you know, it reminds me of other shows that have really ballooned their popularity. You know, I did Hamilton for a long time, and I think a huge draw for that is that every time you go, you see this new combination of people inhabiting these people that you think you know. And so I think the Notebook really benefits from that too. You go in thinking probably realistically of Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams, right? Or if you've read the book of Noah and Allie, these characters that you've imagined, and then you get to see more layers of paint sort of on these people that now are these like deep, complex, and you know, enigmatic people, not just a sort of cutout of a typical leading man or woman, you know.
Yeah, that's such an apt description given, Allie's love of painting. I wanted to you have one of the standout songs of the show in the first act, "Leave the Light On." It's just such an incredible moment for you, and for the character. So I wanted to ask you, when you first saw that sheet music and heard Ingrid Michaelson, perform it way back, 2 years ago or so, whenever you started it, what was your initial reaction to the material and knowing that you were going to get to originate this, in Chicago and then in New York?
Yeah, what a dream, truly. Like, I mean, so the song was a different song when I did the first reading in 2020. It was called My Ghost, and it was also a great song, but it was very much in process. The whole score was, I mean, the book as well. And so part of, I mean, you get that question all the time, like, what's a dream role that you have, right? And I always kind of give the kitschy answer of like, it hasn't been written yet because it'll be like collaborative with me, right? And that was very much this, like Ingrid and Becca and Michael and Shelley too, our directors. There was such an openness to explore on the voices, bodies of the people playing the parts. And so I think something that I brought to the part that they really leaned into, and I'm thankful for, is that like Noah in this middle section is in pain. Like it's not necessarily what you think of when you think of this like beautiful love story with the birds that mate for life, right? Like it's you get a lot of that, but that phase is full of this like confusion and misunderstanding and having come back from the war and all of this. And so it's nice that the scene that precedes it, there's this sort of excitement about, oh, he finished this house and he's connecting with a friend, and you get the feeling that he might be okay, and then you sort of get to explore this darker thing that he's been. I mean, the house is of course a stand-in for this relationship, and it's cool that he finished the house, but then of course he says, oh, it's not ready to sell. It's like, the lady doth protest too much, like I think it's not ready to sell because you have some stuff to work out, friend. And so being able to lean into that in the song and like really set the stage for these like competing versions of a person, I think is awesome. And the song is like gorgeous as like a sort of singer with pop sensibilities and stuff too. Like I'm always so thankful to see writers, pop writers writing original music for theater. I think 70 years ago or so, when we would all gather around the dinner table and listen to My Fair Lady like over dinner, like that's such an era gone by, right? I mean, now we're sort of clawing back into that with things like Hamilton and even Glee and like these sort of mainstream things that are bringing theater music back into the fold. But to have pop writers write original pieces for theater, I mean, they're pop writers for a reason. I mean, the songs are gorgeous and earworms and also creative and thoughtful. And so, yeah, it's like beyond a dream to sing the score.
The song is such a journey for you too, because I feel like it starts kind of optimistically, or he's kind of still hopeful about Allie's return, but in those final kind of lines, he kind of realizes that he feels alone. He might have to move on. How do you kind of chart that journey for yourself as you're performing it? Because it's organic in the music, but you convey it so well too in the performance.
These are music to my director note-taking ears because that's really what we aimed for, right? Like we wanted to show. I'm always a believer that you're really wanting to, whether it's a scene, a song, or an entire show, like start in one place and end in another, even if it's slightly different. I mean, anything that's one note is just that, right? And so how can you in a song alone on stage chart that arc for yourself without any like external stimulus of a scene partner or something. And so that's a little extra work for the actor, but it's also so like delicious because you're able to chart that all for yourself and you're not beholden to what somebody else is thinking or doing. And so I think like what's so gorgeous about Ingrid's music too, and what makes it easy is like in that song there's a section where it really like slows to a full like con voce section where he is saying these things like, I'm thinking about you and the hole in my chest isn't there anymore and I'm in this happy space, but the music is this like really somber like stretched section, and I love things that compete in that way. And I'm thankful for the, again, like the trust and the freedom from the creatives to take the time with that section to really be able to like fly so close to the sun, imagining how beautiful it's going to be, and to crash, you know, and crashing back into the reality of it. And if you really chart, what's nice is, you know, in a memory play like this where it's fragmented, which is so intentional because her memories are so fragmented and it's not just a linear telling, if you really sort of map it, the end of Leave the Light On is maybe minutes before she shows up at the porch. And so knowing that's coming too, and knowing that you can really hit this rock bottom, this is never going to happen, to then reward yourself with the utter shock that she would arrive. And then the scene that comes after is, it's cool to be in a show where your arc isn't sort of timeline wise exactly the arc that the audience is seeing, so you can do what you need to do for like your character, but then of course fitting into a larger kind of mosaic is not an experience I've had before. It's very cool.
Let's talk about Middle Alley, Joy Woods, who's just so
Mhm.
incredible, and the two of you have such wonderful chemistry and a connection. What has it been like working with her for all this time to really build that rapport? Because obviously, as you're saying, it's such a romantic show, but you get to really also grapple with some complex emotions in the second half,
Mhm.
when you two are kind of exploring why you haven't, you know, as you're reuniting, why you haven't been together. So what has that been like, working with Joy?
Joy is a dream. I mean, first of all, she is so polished and mature for her experience. Like I was amazed meeting her at how just absolutely settled she was already. And to then explore this deeply personal thing is difficult because I think as an actor, you're sort of drawing on your whole life experience. Of course, there's a character, but it's all the sort of grayness of it is what makes these moments exciting. And when you see people really going through like a struggle, and I worried that, you know, doing the show with anybody, frankly, would sort of be uncomfortable in that way. Like there would be some discomfort of bringing. I mean, it's not a happy section of the show, right? I mean, it's fun to sort of play comedically, but then there are moments to sort of settle in. And I think what's nice is that even off stage now we've with all the time spent together and we've really been able to map out even off stage there's a rhythm, a sort of heartbeat to it. So I mean, even after this beautiful song Iron in the Fridge, that's like a another sort of memory of all happiness, and you know she's pregnant in the song and it's a flash forward to something nice. We're able to like breathe together in that energy, you know, and then to go backstage and to get in this bed together where we're about to prepare for this fight. I mean, even as the bed tracks down, like there's always a little moment where we squeeze each other, like, you know, I'll see you at the end, because the next 10 minutes is kind of yelling at each other and getting, you know, like it's odd to be looking at somebody who you're close with and friendly with and you know begin that process. And so even just literally the breathing, I mean, we've been so open to each other to be able to map out a way to do it safely and beautifully. And I am so thankful. I mean, we call each other teammates all the time because that's really what it feels like. Like it's like you're walking into the arena with, for me especially, I mean, I have very little time with other people on stage, and so it really feels like we are this team in this almost like two-hander that is Act Two, where both of us walk in and say, okay, it's us now, you know, like we're grabbing the baton and we're gonna ride this to the end. And yeah, I'm so grateful because I mean, you never know what you're gonna get, and actors are eccentric, and you're dealing with a person and an actor and a character all at once, and it's been just bliss.
You mentioned the iconic rain scene from the film, and of course, it gets recreated on stage in such an exciting and beautiful way. What does that feel like for you and Joy to do together 8 shows a week? And can you kind of feel the audience anticipation of that? And then when it actually happens, like, is that a cathartic moment for you? What is that? I mean, logistically, I'm sure it's not as easy as it looks because you're mic'd, and there's all these kind of technical aspects. But just what is that experience like for you on stage?
You know, it's funny, the idea of it, oh, you know, it's not logistically so easy. I actually find that when doing stage work, especially anything, there's so much suspension of disbelief. And so anything that becomes real or literal is like such a gift. You're able to really ride that adrenal sort of like impact. And so for, you know, there was a performance in Chicago where the rain sort of sputtered and you really feel it then, right? It's like such a letdown, even though as an actor, you're like, I'm imagining the rain, I'm imagining the dock, but there's something about it being literal and real that really takes you sort of on a ride. And you can certainly feel the audience anticipating it. I mean, as soon as we walk into the sort of dock section, I don't think that most folks are on board quite yet, but there's a moment of like thunder and mist starts to fall, and immediately you can feel this sort of whisper like rippling through the audience, and you know it's coming. And there's a nice little, you know, it's not the classic kissing in the rain. There's a sort of twist in it that I think is nice for people who know the story, but if not, I mean, I mean, talk about sort of release and catharsis of the character. It's the first moment that you see middle Noah really experience joy. Like there's a sort of childlike joy there of playing in the rain and being able to experience that with Joy the person and Allie the character and everything. It's like and I mean literally, right, there are two rain curtains that we dive into to get wet, but then once the scene begins we sort of step in so it's hitting our shoulders but not our mics, and there's sort of a privacy to that. It's like you can feel the rain curtain on either side, and we're able to sort of exhale and be like, we got to this first big landmark, and it's a big smile and laugh and moment before we launch into another long section. So I've never had such a I mean, of course, like it's hard to compare, but there's something really beautiful about being able to experience that moment together that everybody's anticipating and that really delivers creatively.
Brian Vasquez, congratulations on the Notebook. Thank you so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.